The screams echo from the cottage as Heinrich presses the thumbscrews tighter. The woman's fingers crack like dry kindling. Blood pools on the wooden table. That is your power, the ability to ruin a life with one whisper. How long until someone used that power against you? She's begging now, promising to confess anything he wants to hear. 3 hours earlier, this woman was baking bread for her children, inconspicuously. Forget the devil. The only miracle here was how fast they turned fear into a fortune. Now she's about to die because someone whispered the word witch and pointed in her direction. One accusation could make you rich beyond your wildest dreams, or it could get you burned alive in the town square. But the money was only half the genius. The other half was the science they invented to prove guilt. Wait until you hear what they considered rock-solid evidence. Welcome to your life as a medieval witch hunter, where fear was the product and torture was the inventory. But to understand this life, you have to realize you weren't an agent of God. You were a businessman, and business was booming. Because make no mistake, witch hunting wasn't just about being holy. It was about cold, hard cash. You weren't some wild-eyed fanatic stumbling through the countryside. You were a licensed professional, with official backing from the church and legal immunity that would make a modern politician jealous. Towns begged you to visit. Magistrates cleared their calendars when you arrived. Fear preceded you like a herald announcing royalty. Your money flowed from 3 main sources. First, confiscated property. Second, torture fees. Third, execution payments. Confiscate, torture, execute. Each stage came with an invoice. Matthew Hopkins perfected this system. The self-proclaimed Witchfinder General turned witch hunting into England's most profitable cottage industry during the 1640s. Hopkins charged 20 shillings per town visit, plus expenses. But here's the genius part. He also demanded payment for every witch he found. Not convicted, found. So, the more accusations he made, the richer he got. Hopkins claimed responsibility for over 300 deaths in just 2 years. That's roughly 3 executions per week, at 20 shillings per witch, plus travel costs. Hopkins was pulling in more money than most nobles, all while convincing everyone he was doing God's work. His business model was simple, but brilliant. Roll into town with official-looking documents, announce that Satan had established a stronghold in the area, offer to cleanse the community for a reasonable fee. Then start pointing fingers at anyone who couldn't afford to fight back. Widows, beggars, women who lived alone, anyone with a grudge against them from a neighbour. You lived in this weird social paradox where you were simultaneously the most respected and most feared person in any room. The only way to keep the cash register ringing was to keep the accusations coming. The quota system kept you busy. You couldn't just find one witch and call it done. That would suggest the problem was small, contained. No, you needed to uncover entire networks of devil worshippers, covens, conspiracies. The more witches you found, the more essential your services became. Territory politics got vicious. Hopkins competed directly with other hunters, like John Stern, for the most profitable regions. They'd race to reach towns first, sometimes arriving simultaneously and having to split the fees. Professional courtesy only went so far when your livelihood depended on finding evil where others saw ordinary people. The pressure was constant. Every town expected results proportional to their payment. Find too few witches and they'd question your abilities. Find too many, and they might start wondering if you were the real problem. You walked a tightrope between satisfying bloodlust and avoiding suspicion. Children hid when they saw you coming. Adults measured their words carefully in your presence. Even casual conversation became dangerous when every phrase could be twisted into evidence of supernatural dealings. But the real genius was the self-perpetuating nature of the business. Fear bred more accusations. Accusations generated more investigations. More investigations meant more confessions under torture. More confessions proved the threat was real, justifying higher fees for your continued services. The breakdown of trust was the real weapon. You didn't stop the devil, you monetized him. If you had to choose one person in your life, a neighbor, an acquaintance, a rival, who would you have accused to save yourself? Drop your answer in the comments below. Here's the catch. A business built on death still requires proof, so you had to get creative with your detective work. The water test was your bread and butter. Strip the accused naked, tie their hands to their feet, then throw them into the nearest pond or river. Spoiler, they did not check if she weighed the same as a duck. If they floated, they were clearly guilty, because water, being pure and holy, would reject anything evil. If they sank and drowned, well, they were innocent. Congratulations to their family. This test had a beautiful simplicity that juries loved. No ambiguity, no lengthy deliberations, just physics, theology, and a very wet corpse. The fact that most people float when their lungs fill with air, irrelevant. Floating meant guilt. Guilt meant execution. Execution meant payment. Body searches provided your most reliable evidence. You'd examine every inch of the accused's skin, looking for devil's marks. These could be moles, birthmarks, scars, or really any blemish that looked vaguely suspicious under candlelight. Extra nipples were particularly damning, supposedly used to suckle demon familiars. You carried a special needle for pricking these marks. If the accused felt pain, the mark was natural and innocent. If they didn't scream when you jabbed them, clearly the devil had numbed the spot to protect his servant. You kept several needles in your kit, some sharp, some with retractable points. Professional flexibility was key. Torture chambers were where you really earned your reputation. Pain had a wonderful way of clarifying people's memories about their supernatural activities. The thumbscrews, the strappado, the rack, each tool designed to extract truth through agony. And amazingly, almost everyone remembered signing pacts with Satan once the bones started breaking. You told yourself it was justice. You knew it was business. The confessions followed predictable patterns. As torture intensified, the stories grew more elaborate. Midnight flights, dancing with demons, and cooking babies. Your victims became surprisingly creative when properly motivated, and the Witchfinder's favourite part, it all counted as evidence. But the confessions weren't the most absurd part. The real clincher was the witch's familiar. We're talking about a co-conspirator in a capital crime, with a name like Vinegar Tom. The witch's familiar became your favourite piece of evidence. Hopkins proved this beautifully with Elizabeth Clark, one of his first major catches in Manningtree. After keeping her awake for days, Clark finally confessed to consorting with demons. But the real evidence? Her familiars. A dog named Jarmara, a rabbit called Vinegar Tom, plus assorted imps with names like News and Peckin the Crown. Hopkins documented these creatures with the same careful attention he'd give to human accomplices. He questioned Clark about their feeding habits, their supernatural abilities, their roles in her witchcraft. The court records treat a rabbit named Vinegar Tom as seriously as they would a human conspirator. Let that sink in. A rabbit named Vinegar Tom was a co-conspirator in a capital crime. Vinegar Tom, a rabbit, a capital crime. If that's not the weirdest historical detail you've ever heard, tell me what is. Any animal found near the accused could be their supernatural companion. That cat sleeping in the sun, clearly a demon in disguise. The toad in their garden, obviously Satan's spy. Even flies buzzing around their house became proof of occult activity. You'd interrogate these animals with the same seriousness as human witnesses. Did the cat respond when called by a Christian name? Suspicious. Did it hiss at holy symbols? Damning. Did it seem unusually intelligent for a common house pet? Absolutely diabolical. The fact that animals can't actually testify in court was a minor legal technicality you learned to work around. Spectral evidence was your nuclear option. This allowed testimony about things people claimed to see in dreams or visions. Someone's spirit allegedly appeared at night to pinch them while their physical body slept safely at home. Perfectly admissible in court. A ghostly figure resembling the accused supposedly flew through their bedroom window. Rock-solid proof of supernatural abilities. The beauty of spectral evidence was its complete immunity to contradiction. How could the accused prove they weren't astrally projecting while asleep? How could they demonstrate their soul wasn't gallivanting around the countryside while their body lay in bed? Impossible. You'd found the perfect crime that left no physical evidence, because it happened entirely in the spiritual realm. Mass hysteria became your best marketing tool. Once accusations started flying in a community, they spread like wildfire. Children would suddenly remember strange encounters. Adults would recall suspicious conversations from months earlier. Everyone wanted to demonstrate their piety by identifying evil in their midst. The process fed on itself beautifully. Each confession implicated others. Each execution validated the threat. Each investigation uncovered new evidence of Satan's influence. You weren't just solving individual cases anymore. You were unraveling vast conspiracies that stretched across entire regions. The most successful hunters developed signature techniques. Hopkins popularized sleep deprivation, forcing suspects to walk continuously for days until exhaustion broke their resistance. Others specialized in family interrogations, threatening children to make parents confess. Innovation distinguished the professionals from the amateurs. Now, imagine waking up every morning to this nightmare profession. Your day starts before dawn, because accusations work best when you catch people unprepared. Surprise visits prevent suspects from disposing of evidence or coordinating their stories with accomplices. You'd arrive at a cottage just as smoke began rising from the morning cooking fire. The family inside would hear your horse's hooves on the cobblestones and know their world was about to end. Children would peek through the shutters. Adults whispered prayers that wouldn't save them. The public accusation was theatre as much as investigation. You'd gather the entire village in the square, your official documents gleaming with seals and signatures. Your voice would carry across the crowd as you announced that Satan had chosen this community for corruption. Every face in the audience would pale, wondering if their name would be called. Crowd management required delicate skill. Too little drama, and people questioned whether the threat was real. Too much excitement, and the mob might take justice into their own hands before you could extract your fees. You needed them angry enough to support your work, but controlled enough to follow your lead. Your torture chamber was typically the local jail, or a rented room in the magistrate's building. You'd arrive with your leather satchel, full of instruments, each tool polished and maintained like a craftsman's pride. The thumbscrews, leg crushers, iron boots. They weren't just weapons, they were your livelihood. The breaking point varied by individual. Some confessed the moment they saw your tools laid out on the table. Others held out through hours of agony before their resolve cracked. You learned to read faces, to recognize when someone was ready to say anything to make the pain stop. Managing the political tightrope was your most dangerous skill. Accuse a poor widow and nobody complained. Point fingers at a merchant's wife and suddenly you faced questions about your methods. Target a noble's daughter and you might find yourself on the wrong end of a treason charge. You developed an instinct for safe targets. People without powerful friends or family connections. Individuals who'd made enemies in the community. Anyone who stood out as different, strange, or simply unlucky enough to be in the wrong place when you needed a fresh conviction. Personal paranoia consumed your daily life. Every conversation became a potential trap. Show too much knowledge about witchcraft and people wondered where you learned such dark secrets. Seemed too comfortable with torture, and they questioned your own spiritual purity. Sleep became elusive. You'd lie awake, wondering if the woman you'd executed really was innocent. If the man you'd torture tomorrow might have friends powerful enough to seek revenge. If your own associates might betray you to save themselves if the political winds shifted. Your reputation preceded you like a funeral bell. Innkeepers would reluctantly provide rooms, charging extra for the privilege of housing death itself. Merchants would offer discounts, hoping generosity might protect them from future scrutiny. Even priests would speak carefully around you, knowing that religious authority meant nothing if you decided they were harbouring witches. Your hands would shake sometimes, late at night, when you thought nobody was watching. The screams echoed in your memory long after the torture sessions ended. You'd catch yourself flinching at sudden movements, wondering if this was the moment someone would finally seek revenge for all the lives you'd destroyed. So, how did this whole profitable nightmare finally end? It wasn't God or the devil who stopped the witch hunters. It was politics, and the moment the hunter became the hunted. But fear wasn't the byproduct, it was the business model. You were living in a bubble of fear and power. But the bubble always pops when too many important people start getting accused. When Hopkins himself died mysteriously in 1647, rumours spread that he'd been tested with his own methods. The tide turned quickly once doubt crept in. Communities that had welcomed you with open arms suddenly viewed you as a dangerous relic. Your legal immunity evaporated. Your church backing disappeared. The very people who paid your fees now demanded investigations into your methods. They had to find a new villain to justify the bloodshed. And sometimes, the hunter was the easiest target. The witch hunter's ledger always balances. Every confession, every execution, every piece of confiscated property. You've seen the whole equation now. The medieval witch hunt was a system designed to monetize fear and accusation. And if you look closely at the news today, you'll realise that system never went out of style. You've seen how easily fear turns into profit. Don't let the algorithm play Witchfinder. Subscribe